Well, good afternoon. It's great to be in Jacksonville International Airport, and I've got our Chief Financial Officer for the state of Florida with us, Blaise Angolia, who's doing a great job and really spearheading this movement. We call it the Florida Agency for Fiscal Oversight, FAFO, these FAFO audits that are being done around the state for local governments, and he's going to talk about a lot of the findings, kind of these initial findings that they're doing. But before I turn it over to him, I will say, when we launched these audits, well, we started with state agencies and state universities, and so we're going to be rolling out some findings on the state universities very soon. There are things that need to be addressed. There's also some things, quite frankly, that they've done, I think, better than expected. So we're going to be rolling that out, and also different things that we've done with state government. But I think if you look at the state of Florida today, right now, the budget that we are operating under is less than the budget we operated under the year before, and that budget the year before was less than the budget the year before that. How many other states are doing that in this country? Not a lot of people. And so we've done what we needed to do to make sure that we continue to add to our rainy day fund. So when I became governor to now, we've more than tripled the state's rainy day fund. In fact, we're now at the point where we're not allowed to put any more money under Florida's Constitution into the rainy day fund. We've maxed it out. And that's good government. And honestly, there should be a limit, because you got to have a cushion for unforeseen circumstances, or even foreseen circumstances, because, economy's cyclical, there's things that happen. But you don't want to just sock away too much money. We want a tax relief for people then, if that's the case. So we have that. We have a AAA credit rating on all major rating agencies. I think the federal government is AA minus. Some of our local governments are not great either, but we've been AAA across the board. Since I've been governor, if you look by the end of this fiscal year and you take the entire history of Florida and all the debt that was accumulated from the 1840s till the present, we will have paid off 50% of that just since I've been governor in 2019. And so we now have the lowest per capita debt of any state in the United States. We also have either the first or second lowest per capita spending of any state in the United States. And if you compare the state of Florida to the state that's the closest to us in population, would be New York State. Now, New York State used to have a lot more people than us. We've got about 4 million more people than New York State now, and perhaps even that will even grow more if they elect this guy mayor in November. So we'll see what happens. But we have millions of more people than New York State, and yet our state budget is less than half of the budget of New York State. Yet, are their roads better? Absolutely not. Services, no. Education, no. In fact, we just got ranked for the 10th year in a row #1 for public university system, higher education in the country. And we have the lowest tuition in the country by a country mile. And we've got the budget, the rainy day fund, but then we've got a lot of not excessive, but excess money in our surplus that's beyond just the rainy day fund, trust funds, general revenue, all this other stuff. And so we're really in good fiscal shape. But it's interesting, as we can talk about all that, look at all the big things we've still been able to do. We've done massive infusion into transportation and roads, and we've done some important things in Northeast Florida, throughout the state. Really, really important. We took projects that weren't even going to start until the 2030s, and we got them going now. They're going to be done 5, 10, 15 years ahead of schedule, depending on the project. And that's taking some of the surplus and applying it in ways that I think are smart. And if you also look, the debt repayment, we've saved a lot of money on interest costs because we're retiring the debt at a discount, having to pay interest over a longer term, and that's more money that goes back in. You look at what we've done on education. Our public universities, part of the reason we have the lowest tuition is because we've provided significant funding for our universities. We've now done over $3 billion for K-12 just for teacher pay through our teacher categorical. No one was doing that prior to 2020 when we launched that initiative. So we're doing big things there. We're doing big things on conservation and environment and Everglades and all these other things, things that are really important. So we're doing all those things, and we're doing major tax relief. You know, we don't have income tax, and we will never have income tax here. We have eliminated commercial rent tax that was not good for small business. We have made sales tax holidays permanent. So now disaster response, disaster preparedness, that's tax-free year-round, those supplies. You just go get what you need. We have permanent back-to-school sales tax holidays where you can load up on those supplies. We just did a Second Amendment tax holiday, sales tax holiday, in effect right now. Knock yourselves out with the ammo and anything you want, tax-free. So we've been able to do all those things in record amounts. I think we've done $7-8 billion just since I've been governor. So we're doing all that. And we're proud of that. We're going to keep it going. We got more in the hopper that we want to do. But you know, if you talk to folks, nobody that I've talked to is really complaining about taxes at the state level. They appreciate the tax relief. They appreciate no income tax. What they're being squeezed by are taxes at the local level with the property taxes. And if you look what's happened, and not just in Florida, this has happened nationwide. Since COVID, you've had a big increase in property values. Obviously, we've had a period of significant inflation nationwide. And Florida, it was kind of compounded because during COVID, the minute somebody was fed up with wherever they were, we were the first state people thought to come to because we did it a lot differently and people appreciated that. And so that was another factor. So you have folks who bought a home. Maybe they bought a home 10 years ago for $350,000. Now they're being told the home's worth $900,000. Well, what does that mean? They got to pay more property tax on that. Now, they didn't sell it for $9,000. They're just being told it's worth that. That's typically not how you do taxation. You know, taxation is if you do a transaction, then there may be a tax on that. But to say that you have an asset and before you've sold it or disposed of it, they're just going to tax you on a higher value, that's basically an unrealized gain. That's what Kamala wanted to do with the stock market when she was running. Remember, she said, we're just going to tax your, so you buy, your 401k goes up and you got to pay more tax. You couldn't do it. You couldn't run an economy like that. So property tax is kind of this aberration where people are hit, not even for making a transaction, just because all of a sudden market conditions have changed. Now, they're not as quick to downgrade the value of your property when the market goes down. It's kind of a one-way ratchet. But what's happened is people are having to pay more, even if you're not raising millage. They're still having to pay more because the assessments have gone up. And so we are leading the effort. We got to get the legislature to put it on the ballot because it's local. It's not something the state can do on its own right now. To do the property tax overhaul so that people, one, can stay in their homes. I mean, we have elderly people that are having to sell their homes because they can't afford to keep paying the property tax. And it's like, well, you know, you need service, you need all that, but like for 50 years, you're just supposed to just keep. When does it end? And it's not, and it doesn't end for folks. So people are having to do that. That's wrong. But then also younger people in this country are being priced out of the American dream. I mean, you look at how much more expensive things are today from what they were 5 years ago. You know, it's dramatic in so many different areas. Housing costs, obviously, you know, or that. And look, the market goes up and down. There's weakness in the housing market. Maybe it'll come back down to earth. It's, you know, it's beyond the control of the state government how all that works. But these things are cyclical. But for the last 4 or 5 years, it's been very difficult. Wouldn't it be good to have young families be able to purchase a home and get relief from those property tax so they're not having to fork over $2-3 grand a year for that? So there's a lot of positives that will come to that relief. And so people will say, oh, you know, you can never do that, you can never do that. And I think what they're showing with what Blaze is doing, with what our teams are doing, is to show, well, wait a minute. You know, we've got places around this state like Broward. They haven't really had population growth on net, but they've had a 60% increase in their budget over the last 4 or 5 years. Why do they need 60%? Why should you pay more or have to keep doing this on property tax so that they can increase budget 60%? So I think what we're showing is, and here it's just natural. This is a natural thing with government. A gusher of revenue comes in because the values are going up, and some of these locals actually raise millage on top of that, which is wrong, but they did do that. So you have a gusher of revenue coming in, and what do politicians do with that revenue? I can tell you they don't do what we did at the state level and pay down half the debt. That's not what they typically do. They typically spend it, and so then the spending goes up. And we don't want people to have to continue to be in this property tax situation simply to fund the increases in that. Especially your personal residence, right? People say, oh, what about Airbnb? Fine. I want Florida residents in their home to be able to own that and have that be meaningful without having to continue to pay rent for the government indefinitely. So what DOJ is doing is really showing there's a lot of room for an overhaul here. Particularly with local governments, and we just want to make sure that taxpayers are being respected. And I listed the statistics about the state of Florida, how our budget, was more last year and less and more the year it's gone down, how we're paying off debt, tax cuts, all this stuff. But yet we're still doing it with our universities, we're doing it with our state agencies, because, look, if we can find other ways to do things, we want to make sure we're doing the best that we can for taxpayers. But let's just be clear. Nobody is being pinched by higher taxes at the state level. We've cut taxes dramatically, and we'll continue to do that. But, we're running out of taxes to cut in Florida at the state level. That's why I really want to get these property taxes and deal with those at the local level, because I think that is the best way that we can provide relief for people throughout the state of Florida. And so to talk about some of the findings and some of the things that his team and our team have been working on is Blaise Ngolea. He's been chief financial officer now for a few months, and I don't think anybody's made more of an impact in that role in my lifetime in Florida than he has since he's been in there. He's been a real bulldog on all these issues, really standing up for taxpayers and working to pave a way so that we have meaningful property tax overhaul in the state of Florida. And I appreciate what he's doing. I knew he'd be very strong on it because he had been very strong on as a state senator. All the things people talk about in Florida, all these big wins that we've put on the board, he was behind most of those as a state senator, particularly on the immigration. DHS just announced Florida leading the way by far on arresting criminal aliens and illegal aliens of anywhere in the country, working with them. And that wouldn't have happened without people like Blaise fighting for that in the Florida Senate. So I appreciate what he's done. I appreciate what he's doing. And he's worked very hard on this, and he's got a lot to say. So come on up, buddy.
Thank you, sir.
Can you tell me when to unveil that?
Governor, first I want to thank you for your leadership on this issue. If you've ever paid attention to the governor's career, you would notice that the governor is in tune with what grassroots people, everyday Floridians, are feeling. He's always a year or 2 years ahead of the curve. He understands what's going on in our community so much to the point that he starts talking about it way before other elected officials ever do. And this is just another in the long lines of one of those issues, particularly a pocketbook issue, that has been creeping up on us over the past 2 years. I had the pleasure of having a conversation with the governor a couple of years ago, and the governor said, look, property taxes are starting to get out of hand, aren't they? And I said, as a builder, yes, I can see that. They absolutely 100% are. Now, how does he know that? It's because he's listening to everyday people. He's on Twitter, he's on Facebook, he's listening to people, and he's understanding that people are getting priced out of their homes, and we do have an affordability issue here in the state of Florida. One, because everyone wants to move here because Florida is the freedom state and there's opportunity here. But the other is because governments have become reckless and going wild with our tax dollars. So, Governor, thank you for being ahead on this issue, just like you have been ahead on many other issues. There are some good friends we see in the audience today, School Board Member April Carney and Councilman Nick O'Halloran. Thank you for coming here. I really appreciate that. So, our office has been going around doing these FAFO audits or calculations over the past couple of months, just trying to explain to people how your local government is taxing you to the hilt. We think that they are excessively spending and wastefully spending to the tune of billions of dollars. Now, your local governments are going to come out and say that, no, we can't do that because we're going to have to cut fire, we're going to have to cut police. That is just absolute BS. So let me explain the methodology and how we're going to get to these numbers. The first is that we went back to pre-COVID numbers in 2019, and we found out what the government budgets were. And then we indexed every year for inflation and population and a government inefficiency factor, and we figured out what the budgets should normally be in today. And then we compared it to what it actually is. And the numbers are absolutely astounding. Now, this is all publicly available information, right? It's in their own budgets. It's unfortunate, but some of the mayors and county commissioners in these areas probably just never even read their own budget because they have no idea what's in it. In fact, we had to tweet at them with screenshots of their own budget just to prove that what we were saying was correct and what they were saying was incorrect. But these numbers are astounding. In Orange County alone, $190 million of this year's budget is wasteful and excessive, way past what it should be with inflation and population, right? And that's assuming that they're not running efficient. You could probably cut way more. In fact, our number for Orange County is probably closer to $230 million. The city of Jacksonville, $199 million worth of wasteful and excessive spending. I'm sorry, Donna Deegan, you're saying that you can't cut, you need every dollar. The taxpayers disagree with you. Hillsborough County, $278 million worth of excessive, wasteful spending. Alachua County, $84 million. We were in Broward yesterday unveiling their number, $189 million of wasteful and excessive spending. Waste and excess that you, the taxpayers, are footing the bill for. All total, with just those 5 counties, we are almost $1 billion worth of the citizens of the state of Florida being overtaxed in just those 5 counties. $1 billion. Now imagine when we get to every city and every county. You can see how that number could easily be in the tens of billions of dollars. So when people start talking about property tax relief and property tax reform and getting rid of property taxes on homesteaded properties, they say you can never do it. You disagree. We vehemently disagree. You could just do that by going back to the 2019-2020 levels of government pre-COVID. It would be easy to do. So do not believe it when bureaucrats and career tax and spend politicians say that they need every dime of your money because they are just not being truthful to you. So, to put it in context, today, those 5 counties could have easily cut their budgets by $1 billion. Easily cut their budgets by $1 billion and never ever have to worry about funding fire, never have to worry about funding police, never have to worry about funding essential services. And let me be clear, and this is probably more for the cameras and people listening to my voice right now. If you are a city or a county that is planning on putting a tax referendum raise on the ballot in November 26, expect a knock on our door from us. If you are a county or a city that raised their millage rate a couple of weeks ago and actually raised property taxes on people this year when people are hurting, you can expect a call from our office. We are going to show the people in your cities and your counties just how much excessive waste, fraud, and abuse that you have, and then you can make the argument to your constituents why you raised taxes when people were feeling the pinch. But government apologists are out en masse. We have said this from day one. You're going to have people, including tax and spend career politicians on both sides of the aisle. You're going to have their allies in the liberal media writing opinions. They are going to try to give every single excuse for keeping government at the levels that they're at. There is no excuse other than expanding government beyond everyone's wildest dreams. They're going to tell you they're going to have to cut fire and police. That is hogwash. In our calculations, we account for inflation, population. We account for them hiring more police and more fire because of increased population. We account for raises for government employees and law enforcement. We account for all of that. The number of $1 billion is in excess of all of that. They are going to say you have specific examples of people making excuses. The mayor of Orange County, Deming, said, well, we're a tourist area. This is all tourism dollars, and that's why we have to spend more. He said that a couple of weeks ago, so we pulled the data. There was actually more people, more tourists visiting Orange County in 2019 than they were last year, 2014. So they can't excuse it on tourism. And I'm going to tell everyone this. The same way last year when Donald Trump got elected, that everyone said that we have an immigration problem. And the left told you, don't believe it. Nobody cares about the issue. When the left kept on saying nobody cares about woke issues, right, what happened? They all got voted out. And Donald Trump got elected president. The left and your tax and spend politicians are as tone deaf on the issue of property taxes as they were on this issue. We are out here not only telling people that, yes, they can cut their budgets, but we are also hopefully changing behavior, because it's about time, I think, that city governments and cities and counties know that somebody is watching out for them and being a taxpayer advocate for them in Tallahassee. But here's the deal. They could easily cut your property taxes. They're choosing not to. It is a conscious choice not to cut your property taxes. Before we get into some of these specifics, I do want to talk about a couple of other things as affordability, right? We know that affordability is the issue. It's an issue that the governor and I and members of the legislature have been tackling, and we will continue to tackle, because it is an important issue here for Floridians. And local governments will speak out both sides of their mouths. Local governments are the biggest hypocrites when it comes to affordable housing and affordability issues. They will go and try to fund affordable housing, give it to nonprofits, they'll try to subsidize rents and all. The easiest way to give people an affordable house is to cut their property taxes. That's part of the payment. But they refuse to do that. They just want to subsidize others to do it. Local governments, if you want to help solve the affordability issue and make homes more affordable, cut your property taxes. That will cut their housing payments. Another last thing, there is a big difference, as the governor said, between what local governments are doing and what the state is doing. This man has been a tremendous ally to the state of Florida when it comes to taxes and holding government accountable. Not only have we socked away money year after year in the rainy day fund so we can go out and rebuild our communities after hurricanes, build the roads faster and quicker and better than ever before, but in addition to that, every year in the legislature, I was in the legislature for 10 years, we used to sit around and think of ways that we can give back the money. We're always looking to cut taxes. Every single year, we file what is called a tax package, which is tax cuts for everyday hardworking Americans. Ask yourself this question. When was the last time your local government offered to cut their tax packages? So to cut your property taxes. So let's go into a couple of specifics. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying this is not all the waste, fraud, and abuse. There is waste, fraud, and abuse at every corner of government. All you do is have to go and look and find it, and you will find it. What we are going to show you today are some of the ridiculousness that we've seen in terms of local governments spending your tax dollars unwisely. And hopefully you will see that after we show you some of these ridiculous examples of wasteful spending, you will know that those numbers of $1 billion, the $190 million, the $199 in Jacksonville are true. Because I'm telling you right now, they are not being good stewards of your taxpayer dollars. One thing I wanted to notice, there she is, Miss Donna Deegan. It's kind of funny because Donna Deegan, Mayor Deegan, said that this was not an example of wasteful spending. Remember when I said when people were tone deaf to what actually is? This is just a stark example of tone deafness. This is $75,000 of waste, fraud, and abuse. This is $75,000 that could have gone out to law enforcement raises, could have helped repave roads. There's a lot of money that this money could have been used for. So it is very fitting that we are here today in the city of Jacksonville at Jacksonville Airport highlighting waste, fraud, and abuse in front of a $75,000 Donna Deegan hologram. But in light of her taking over Jacksonville Airport with her voice, I don't know if you know that when you're in here, this is very, very loud and you can hear her. So in light of taking over Jacksonville Airport with her voice, we actually heard a rumor that Mayor Deegan is opening her own TSA agency, believe it or not. So we took the liberty of making her logo, her new logo for her new TSA agency. Governor?
He's very good. This is all his doing, so TSA.
Donna Deegan's TSA, taxes squandered again. In the city of Orlando, there is a poet laureate program that uses your tax dollars to pay poets to write poems. So in an effort to save taxpayer money, we wrote a couple of them for free. Roses are red, violets are blue, our property taxes are high because of you. We actually made a much larger one, so we'll go over that right now. It's called The Mayor's Purse. Donna waves the ribbon, the budget takes flight. Millions are scattered, gone overnight. A city still waiting for roads to be mended, but checks keep on flowing, quite never ended. The people keep asking, where does it go? The coffers run empty, yet taxes still grow. In the halls of the city, one lesson is clear. Wasteful spending echoes year after year. Thank you, Ms. Donna. Another example, in Orlando, they are paying almost $70,000 for hot yoga classes for employees for free in the middle of the day. I wonder how that conversation goes. Hey, Sheila, are you going to the taxpayer-funded hot yoga class during the day when you should be working? Namaste. Did you get it? City of Orlando employees are provided with training on microaggressions and advanced energy equity, whatever the heck that means. I think it should be considered a macroaggression to hear how much of taxpayer funds are being wasted year after year in local government. The city of Orlando is paying almost $500,000 to count trees. To count trees. Maybe they're trying to find the money tree. Oh, wait, never mind. They actually found it, you, the taxpayers. On the other end of our state, the city of Pensacola, they paid almost $600,000 for a large neon Welcome to Pensacola sign. Maybe it should say Welcome to Wasteful Spending. In Hillsborough County, they provide millions in film subsidies for films that actually nobody has ever heard of. I think we should commission one for them, and we should make it a rom-com, and we could call it Taxpayer Funds, a Love Story. The city of Gainesville pays $189,000 for a director of equity and inclusion. Palm Beach County, their paratransit costs tripled in the last 2 years, and the list goes on and on and on. All jokes aside, these egregious examples of wasteful spending are exactly why property taxes are rising. Your local governments are taking your tax dollars, your property tax revenue, because of increased property values, are expanding government, in some places doubling them, taking your money, wasting it. The taxpayers have had enough, and so have we. But this is what we can do about it. There's two things that we can do about it. One, you can wrap your arms and help the people who are fighting for property tax relief and help them get elected. Okay? Whether they are Democrat or Republican, we need good fiscal stewards of our tax dollars. But the ones that are tax and spend career politicians, it's up to you guys, the voters, of whether you want to keep them on. And the last thing is that we don't have to wait for them to offer property tax relief. And with the governor's leadership, with what we're doing in the legislature and the legislative leaders, we're going to offer true property tax reform that will appear on the November 2026 ballot. Governor, thank you for your leadership. I'm happy to continue this mission with you.
Good job. $75,000, man. Well, thanks, Blaze. I appreciate it. And so, as he pointed out, you know, that's just 5 counties. That's $1 billion, right? And so there's a lot more that's being done. There were some that voluntarily did these audits earlier in the year. And so I think what you're going to be able to see is just at a minimum, and he's doing very rosy assumptions in the sense that population growth, inflation, pay more employees, all this stuff. So they're assuming there's going to be increases, and then this is over and atop those increases. So I think you're going to end up seeing many, many billions of dollars. And so when people say that somehow you can't give people relief from the property tax burden, you know, that just doesn't add up with what he's uncovering. And you know, I think that to have budgets go up, like in some of these counties, 50, 60%. You know, in Florida, our state, so like I said, this year's budget spends less than the year before. The year before budget spends less than the year before that. We've had inflation during that time. We've had statewide population growth. I mean, we've been either number 1 or number 2 in net migration during that time. A lot of people in Northeast Florida see that. I mean, just look at like St. Johns County. I mean, you got all these people moving in there. And I know a lot of the residents are like, slow down. Like, we don't want, you know. So it's all these. And yet we're able to manage this. And look, I have to line item veto. You know, I submitted a budget. You know, they came in about $600 million higher than my budget, the legislature. So I pared it back down, and we vetoed about $600 million, and basically got it to where I was with our budget recommendations. And so there's a give and take with that, but it can be done. And you know, there's certain things. It's like, you know, how much does energy cost in terms of like gasoline, you know, the power rates. There's home prices. There's grocery prices. There's a lot of things. The problem is like the government, at least the state government, like policies can impact that, but it's not controlled, of course, by government. I mean, now Mandami wants to have city grocery stores where I guess the government will set the price, but that's just not the way it works. The one thing we control through our Constitution that's purely a government function is taxation. And in this case, local government's ability to tax you on your personal residence. And so that's what we're going to give major reform and relief for, and we can do it. So you'll be hearing a lot more about this over the many months ahead, but I appreciate everybody working hard. There's a lot more findings that are going to be done. And as I said, you know, we've got findings on universities that we've done, and we'll also have some findings on some state agencies as well. So I look forward to working on it. And we're also going to do findings when the findings warrant it. If there's a municipality that's doing a good job, you know, we want to be able to highlight that too. And it could be a blue city that could potentially be doing. We're not going to. We'll give you credit. And I know that there are red areas that have spent way too much. So this spans. It's all about the taxpayer, and it's all about identifying the overspending. But if a place is doing a good job, you know, they deserve to be recognized for that, and we will do that. Okay. Do we got any questions? Yes. He's got a lot of examples. Yeah, he does. But I think the point is not to just do, you know, exhaustive examples per se. He can do that. He can do more. I mean, I think he's willing to do. I got a whole list that I was looking at yesterday in the office. But I think the overall thing is, where were we with these budgets 4 or 5 years ago? Even if you program in population growth, even if you program in rising costs, even if you program in pay and salary and benefit increases, even if you program in, which Blaze is doing, you still have spending on top of that. Now, if they can point to, hey, that's spending that if we didn't have that, you'd be in a world of hurt, then they should do that, right? I mean, that's a fair argument to make, but I don't think a lot of them are making it. They're basically just saying we have no other choice. And when you hear some of the explanations, like the tourism in Orlando, it's not as high as it was pre-COVID. I mean, it's higher than it is in a lot of other parts of the country, but not higher than pre-COVID. So, okay, so if that's your justification, why were you able to get away with a budget less than that 4 or 5 years ago? Of course you can do it. Of course you can. So the question is what are we trying to do? And I think one of the main things we've got to be trying to do is to give relief to our Florida residents in their property taxes. It's important, and we can do it. Yep.
Jake, I want to put some of this also in context for you so you understand. The governor is absolutely right the way we're doing the calculations. But what people need to realize is that we have specific examples. We have we have reams of specific examples. But the expansion of the government bureaucracy itself is a large, wasteful, and excessive expense. And look, we've seen this playbook before. We've seen the same thing happen in the mid-2000s, where property taxes went up, property taxes went up, governments expanded, they were crying poor, and they told everyone that they couldn't cut or they would have to lay off the police and fire. They came out with these sob stories saying that you're going to call 911 and nobody's going to show up. So let's fast forward and see what happened, right? Well, in 2010 or 2012, we got an additional homestead exemption, but something also happened at the same time. For the first time in the history of the United States, property values actually went down. So local governments were faced with a with a revenue cut off of an additional homestead exemption. At the same time, valuations went down. They survived. No one got laid off. Nobody at police, nobody at fire got laid off. So them coming out and saying that they can't cut anything is just hyperbolic nonsense, because we've seen this playbook before. We've seen them be able to cut. We've seen them be able to cut unwillingly by virtue of the taxpayers granting an additional homestead exemption, and by the virtue of property taxes receding for the first time in U.S. history. They're going to be fine. The taxpayers are the ones that are not fine right now, and I'm always going to side with the taxpayers over big government.
Well, in the state of Florida, I mean, we have the lowest number of state employees per capita in the United States of America. And, you can say what you want, but is there another state that you would trust more to respond to a hurricane? Is there another state that you trust more? I mean, we rescued people from Haiti, for Pete's sake. In 2024, we rescued people from the Middle East. I mean, we've done a lot of stuff above and beyond what most people would think would expect government to do, and we're happy to do that, but we're doing it with a small footprint, so that can be done, and we want to make sure that that's kind of the expectation. Yes, sir.
I can't hear.
Can someone repeat that? I couldn't hear all that. Did you guys, anyone? You're talking about the federal shutdown? No. So, it's interesting. We rolled out, so we've got the Baker County facility too, which is doing incredibly well, and we've got the one at the Dade Collier Airport in the Everglades. And people are like, oh my gosh, it's going to cost so much money. And I said, no, we're actually going to get reimbursed because we're helping, with this mission. And then they sued us, and they found a judge, and we knew we were going to lose in front of the judge. And then, oh my gosh, the media was giddy. Oh, it's done. And then I said, no. It's going to continue to go, and sure enough, that's where we're at. It's going, it's operational. Friday in Tallahassee, DHS came and they already are issuing massive numbers of reimbursements, tens of millions of dollars already. So this is all in the kitty. We know that, and honestly, like I was doing some event a couple weeks ago, and Tom Homan was like, submit those reimbursements. He's like, we've got a lot of money. We want to get you guys reimbursed. So that'll happen. I do think the immigration, when they say the government shuts down, it really doesn't shut down, right? I mean, it's like non-essential shuts down. I think why do we have non-essential government? It should either be essential or not. But that's a discussion for another day, right? I mean, it's just kind of ridiculous. So you have the immigration mission is obviously an essential function, and so they're going to continue operating those flights. We've got 5 flights leaving from the Baker County with those folks a week now, and we've got similar going down in South Florida. And so these are folks coming in, processed, staged, not kept there forever and a day. The job is to be kind of a staging ground so that the feds can bring them back to their home country. So we'll get that, and this will be resolved at some point. I mean, it's kind of just the typical D.C. theater. Our Congress has got a lot of issues. I see somebody like Chuck Schumer. If you don't believe in term limits after watching Chuck Schumer, I don't know what to say. We need term limits for these guys. There should be a balanced budget requirement for them because, they're arguing over this. But honestly, neither the House or the Senate are actually reducing spending, which the federal government needs to do because they're spending too much. But it'll be resolved at some point. And I have no doubt that the checks, will be flowing. So that's all ready to go. We'll be able to handle all that. I don't think there's going to be a problem. And again, this is what we said going into it. I still think, people, and the amount of money they talk about is usually inaccurate. They used to say it cost $400 million to open it. It did not. And they just pick and choose kind of like, there'll be a contract for like a year, which may or may not last a year. They'll add up all this stuff. So they play those games. But we knew we were going to be reimbursed. But here's the thing. I love how the media will say, well, how much does it cost to house a detainee? They never ask, what's the cost of illegal immigration? How much does it cost schools? How much does it cost hospitals? How much does it cost the criminal justice system, our jails, our prisons if people are committing crimes? What's the cost to families that have been victimized by criminal aliens? They never talk about those costs. And so what we're doing, yes, we're going to get reimbursed, but we're saving costs on our society by enforcing the rule of law. And so what we're doing is leading the nation. We're doing the right thing. We also have zero tolerance in Florida for attacks against any law enforcement, but particularly ICE personnel. You try that here, you're going to have the book thrown at you, and you're going to regret that you didn't do it. Florida's not Portland. That's not how we roll, and we respect and protect the people that enforce the laws on our behalf. Yes, sir. So we're working on the exact proposal, and the reason is because it's got to pass the legislature by, I think, 2/3 to get on the ballot, and then it requires 60% of the voters for approval. And so we want to make sure that we've got a product. I'm not just doing this to just go around and crow about property tax. I want to see something big enacted. That's the whole goal. So we're doing that. We've got numbers, we've got language, we're doing that. So that will happen. You guys will see that in due time. What I've pointed out, though, is I view it differently between a Florida resident with their primary resident that's a homestead and that being tax-free versus investors who own these Airbnbs, snowbirds, all those other stuff. I'm focusing on the Florida resident. I'm focusing on people being able, to own their own home without being squeezed by the property tax. So that's always our focus. And not only that, it's like, okay, these local governments that tax, they tax Airbnb, they tax the snowbird properties, they tax commercial. I think there should be protection to say, okay, if you're doing that, then you talk about schools and police. You should only be able to spend on police, fire, schools, and the things that matter. Don't let them tax even a snowbird. Don't tax that and spend it on this, okay? Don't tax it and spend it on dropping 200 grand for an equity officer. You know, do it for schools, do it for law enforcement, do it for fire. So I think that there's actually ways where you can do a proposal that's going to guarantee a strong stream of revenue to the things that we really, really care about. So all that, you know, we've got, and we've been talking about this for a while. It's not going to be voted on prior to November of 2026. The only way we could get it on earlier is if we got 3/4 of the legislature to set a special date for they're not going to do that, right? I mean, if they did it, if they would be willing to do it, we could do it. So it's going to November 26th. So we really have to get it passed and on the ballot, you know, prior to the primary cycle being done in August. And so I'm not saying we're going to wait that long, but, you know, we could potentially have a special session on property tax right in the middle of the Republican primary season in July or August. Imagine that. I don't think a lot of these guys would want to vote the wrong way then. But it's interesting, when they know the voters are watching, you know, they tend to govern themselves accordingly. So we've got runway. We want to make sure we do it right, but I want to make sure it's something that actually sticks. I think the things that we, you know, if you look at Florida, how we've approached our stuff, we don't just go out and do. We know there's going to be roadblocks. There's always roadblocks. These judges that we always get. There's a handful of courts we know we'll lose in, but then we win on appeal. So we work on that. There's other things. But we want this stuff to stick. We want to give you an opportunity to have something meaningful that's going to help families here, that the legislature can obviously sign off on, but then that the voters will approve. And it's both an art and a science, because you got to make sure that the numbers work good. Then you also got to make sure that the voters, when they see it, that it's something that is positive. And I think one of the reasons why a lot of the amendments that the legislature has drafted over the years have failed is because you read it and you don't know what the hell it means. It's like written in legislative, bureaucratic speak that normal people don't talk or write like that. And so you got to write it in a way that I think resonates with people. So we're working on doing that as well. Yes, sir. We work through appointments as they go. As you guys know, there's vetting that has to be done on all this stuff. So, you know, there'll be some names that, oh, you know, this person applied or this person's great, and they may look great on paper. Then it's like, all right, well, they've got like 4 DUIs. Or, all right, well, I can't appoint you, right? I mean, like, or they did this or something. So they got to go. They got to vet folks, and so they're in the process of doing that. So when I get, you know, kind of a critical mass of folks that are that are available for that, then we go ahead and pull the trigger. But, you know, we've got a lot of appointments, and we do them a lot. And I think that honestly, I would invite, not on this one and not on the airport here, because we do have some that are important. But if you look at the sheer number of boards in this state, I mean, it's so we would really like to see some of that streamlined. I think it could be a good government story to streamline. So now we have eliminated some of the occupational licensing, which was really just a barrier to entry. But we need to do more, and hopefully the legislature will do. They were not willing to go as far as I wanted to last year on the retrenching of some of this. But it's like, you know, a lot of governors like, oh, they want as many appointments as possible, like patronage. I don't want that. I want the government to operate sensibly and effectively as possible, and retrenching the number of appointments, I think, would actually be good government.
We're looking across all spectrums. If it makes sense to actually deliver the core functions of government, then it's probably something that we would agree with. But The problem is that government starts getting stuff that they're not supposed to be involved in anyway. Look, the first rule of government, function of government, is to protect its people. That's why the very first thing that they need to fund is your fire and your police departments, right? But then there are other things that they have to fund in order to just keep the operation going. But the problem is, and what it sounds like, it is a symptom of a much larger problem, is that they have all this extra money and they can put all these extra superfluous programs in there that are probably not a good use of taxpayer dollars. So I think voters would be absolutely surprised and shocked if they knew that a portion of their property taxes, that they go out and they work, 40 hours a week, is going to be paid for stuff like that. So everything is on the table when it comes to right-sizing a government and delivering a superior product. In the private sector, we try to deliver the lowest unit cost at the lowest cost and deliver a great product, right? It's unfortunate, but the government is actually the exact opposite of that. It's a 180. It's the converse of that. They deliver an inferior product at a much higher cost. So to answer your question, it doesn't sound like it's a great use of taxpayer funds. We would have to delve into that more specifically. But what we're finding is that a lot of the stuff we're seeing isn't a great use of taxpayer funds.
Right. So what I've said is, we're focused on homesteaded Florida residents. And so I think the ability for local governments, if I were starting a society from scratch, I wouldn't do property. I would do consumption. But that's not where we're at. So when you're talking about, like, for example, the residential property tax revenue in Florida, a majority of that is non-homesteaded properties, as it is now, right? I mean, that's just, and it makes sense because some of these wealthy people have expensive homes, whatever. Commercial, all that stuff. I don't think we're going to go into that realm. And so that's 70% of all the revenue they're currently doing just on property tax alone. So our focus is going to be on that 30 to 33% of the revenue that is derived from taxing people's primary residence and that are homesteaded properties. And I think that's the best way to achieve something meaningful. That's the best way to do something that could actually pass. And it also just, I've had people raise good points. It's like you go into some of these places around Florida and it's like a whole community will be like Airbnbs. Or, somebody will buy all these investment property and they rent them out to people. Well, that causes the cost of housing, to go up. And so if you did it this way, there would be a huge advantage for being a traditional homeowner with respect to property tax, whereas the Airbnbs and all those, could be continued to be subject to the same stuff that's happened, and they can even potentially do other things. So, yeah, so if you have a Florida resident, you heard me this in the last session, I don't want to cut taxes on Canadian tourists or snowbirds. Like, why would we do that? We have other people that want to pay, that pay tax on our behalf. Yeah, let's do that. So the more we can not have Floridians bear, the better it is for our residents. So that's just something that I believed in. And look, of all 50 states, we may be the only state that could pull it off. Because of one, we still attract tourists, we attract snowbirds, we attract all this stuff. We attract people that come from really everywhere you can think of. And so we have an ability to, I think, have this really diverse tax base where all these governments can still do the basic things. I have no doubt about all that. So stay tuned. There is going to be a good proposal. I do think it's going to get great support in the legislature, and we'll be very public about that. But we do have because I can't get this done on the ballot until November 26. We have time to do it really thoughtfully and everything like that. All right, we got a big weekend coming up in the state of Florida. Do we have any Florida Gator fans here? Okay. They got a chance to redeem the season against Texas, Arch Manning coming to town. At the beginning of the season, that was the game I marked on my calendar. I'm like, man, I got to go to that game. It just hasn't worked out as well, in Gainesville this year. So the other game, do we have any Florida State fans here today? We've got some Florida State. So we've got Miami coming to Tallahassee which if Florida State had beaten Virginia on Friday night, this would have been the biggest game in the Sunshine State in a long time. Still a big game. Miami's very good. Florida State looked very good. Didn't really get it done against Virginia and kind of fell off. But I'll tell you, that Alabama victory looks better and better. I mean, Alabama looks really good. So I think it's going to be a good weekend. So I hope everybody enjoys that. And hopefully, we've got good games in both Tallahassee and Gainesville. Thanks, everybody.
All right.